Kenya, a nation proud of its breathtaking beauty and rich history. A history that whispers of its equal opportunities, yet within its fabric lie the untold stories of women whose courage and resilience helped shape its destiny. Their voices, their struggles, and their triumphs, all part of a legacy that continues to inspire and empower. By 1920, the British colonial government had settled over 25,000 Britons in Kenya. To accommodate them, British forces brutally removed more than 1 million Kenyans from their homes and stripped them of their land, acquiring close to 8 million hectares of the best arable land at that time.
We have women participating in all the other phases, during the Mau Mau period in the 1950s, during that period of the independence struggle, women were participating.
In 1947, amid rising tensions and the Mau Mau freedom movement, Kenyans elected Jomo Kenyatta to lead the Kenyan African Union, KAU, which called for more representation in the Colonial Legislative Council, self-determination, land restitution, and independence from British colonial rule. Muthoni wa Kirima, the only woman to achieve the rank of Mau Mau Field Marshal, alongside Brigadier Anne Jogu, who wielded a rifle with precision, and Brigadier Njoki Wagishinga, Jacinta Kabika Mariama, also known as General Kobia, Wamboi Otieno, Mau Mau intelligence agent, and Hannah Wanjiru, who fought in the forest for 2 years and guided fighters to safety, also stood out. These women and many others, whose names remain lesser known, were central to the resistance against colonial oppression, leading with unmatched courage and determination. Sarah Sarai, a pioneering career nurse, was detained for resisting the British actions against Kenyans. On October 20, 1952, Sarah was arrested by British colonialists for her involvement in the Mau Mau rebellion. This was the same day Jomo Kenyatta and other nationalist leaders were detained. Sarah was first held at Athi River when she got detained, then transferred through several detention centers, Isinya, Kamiti, Gatamayo, and Kirigiti. She was eventually released in 1960, but remained restricted to her home village of Kinoo for another year. A passionate advocate for African women's political rights, Sarah founded the Nairobi African Women's League, which campaigned for greater political space for African women during the colonial era. She tirelessly fought for labor and family rights, securing jobs for women in the Nairobi African Advisory Council, where she served as the first African woman between 1949 and 1951. She also won maternity leave rights for women. Sarah's courage and leadership remain an integral part of Kenya's independence story. The 1950s also saw the birth of Maendeleo ya Wanawake, Kenya's oldest and largest women's voluntary organization. Initially led by colonial figures, it failed to address the pressing concerns of Kenyan women, such as independence, political representation, equality, and economic empowerment. However, when Phoebe Asio became the first national chairperson, her leadership marking a turning point, making Maendeleo ya Wanawake more inclusive and responsive to the diverse challenges faced by Kenyan women. As the African independence movement gained momentum, the Legislative Council, LegCo, emerged as a vital platform for Kenyans to voice their demands and fight for their freedom. The British government called for constitutional negotiations at the Lancaster House conference in the UK, presenting a glimmer of hope for a new beginning for Kenya as it moved closer to independence.
So the Independence Constitution was drafted at Lancaster House. It was part of what are known as the Lancaster House Constitutions. Its primary purpose was to negotiate independence. There was a woman that was there. They just didn't allow her to speak. She was called Priscilla Abwao.
Priscilla Abuao, who until then was a social worker, was nominated by Governor Sir Patrick Renison and became the only female Kenyan representative to the Lancaster House Constitutional Conference in London in 1962.
She presented a memorandum on the rights of the African woman. That memorandum made several demands around women's socio-economic rights. But Priscilla was a lone voice. She was not allowed to speak. And so the demands around women's rights were not captured in the new constitution.
In her memorandum, she argued that women sought no special privileges, only equal partnership in the nation they were building, as well as the endeavors to create that society. Sadly, her suggestions were ignored, and the final constitution failed to recognize women as bona fide citizens of Kenya, denying them equal rights and entitlements as their male counterparts. Disheartened, Priscilla Abuao resigned from the council on June 15, 1962, returning to her work in social service.
I, Jomo Kenyatta, being chosen.
In 1963, Kenya gained independence and became a republic. But for women, it was not yet uhuru. Women continued to push for their inclusion and participation, fair representation and legal reforms to address issues like marginalization in marriage, divorce and inheritance laws. The Kenyan parliament continued to dismiss the women's pleas, with no action taken to change the political system or policies that could recognize or protect women's rights. In 1969, Grace Onyango became the first woman elected to Kenya's parliament. She also served as Deputy Speaker of Parliament. In the subsequent elections of 1974, Honorable Grace Onyango, serving her second term, was joined by Dr. Julia Ojambo, who was also appointed the first woman assistant minister. Philomena Chelagat Mutai was also elected at just 24 years old, making her the youngest woman ever elected at that time. The coming of the 1990s marked Kenya's journey towards the collective struggle for democratization.
If you're going to shed blood because of our land, we will.
Professor Wangari Maathai emerged as a pro-democracy activist and environmental champion, founding the Green Belt movement. She went on to be elected to Parliament in 2002 and served as Assistant Minister for Environment. Her relentless efforts were globally acknowledged when she became the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. The 1990s also saw the formation of the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD, that led to the iconic July 7, 1990 Sabasaba revolt. This was seen as the first significant organized defiance against the then President Moi and KANU's repressive rule.
So by the time Sabasaba came, we were part of the group that was planning the Sabasaba meeting, and there were quite a number of women involved, not just lawyers, but also women politicians like the late Wambui Otieno and many others. And within the lawyers, the women lawyers, we were several very active women lawyers. I remember Judge Martha Koome. I remember names like Beatrice Nduta. I remember names like Lillian Wanjira and many others. I'm really mentioning those who were really on the front line. And there was discontent everywhere in the country.
I am glad to inform Kenyans that I have today assented to the bills as a sign of my commitment to political reforms.
Their efforts paved the way for democratic reforms, forcing Moi to agree to the demands for the return of multi-party democracy and establishment of term limits for the presidency. The momentum continued to build, culminating in the landmark 1995 Women's Conference in Beijing. So pivotal was the conference that Kenya sent a delegation of 500 women to the World Conference on Women in Beijing. This conference was pivotal in setting the Beijing platform for action that outlined the 12 critical areas of concern.
So after that conference, the women just kept on organizing and trying to find ways and means of bringing their issues onto the negotiating table. That's why CBSU brought an affirmative action motion in Parliament in 1987, which was lost on the floor of Parliament. And as the women sat there to mourn this failure of this motion to be passed, for them it was a loss of a battle, but the beginning of the war. They left that place with one decision: we are going into politics, and we are going to organize around politics. And that's when Women's Political Caucus was formed, with Phoebe Asio as the chair.
By 1998, the Ufungamano Initiative emerged, pushing for a people-driven constitutional reform process. It aimed to counter the government's unilateral move to form a commission to undertake constitutional reforms at that time. This led to the adoption of the Ufungamano commissioners to the government-led commission, ensuring that a third of the commissioners of the CKRC and delegates to the Constitutional Conference were women. When Mwai Kibaki won the 2002 election with a landslide, the bomas of Kenya constitutional review process was relaunched. On August 27, 2010, the new constitution was promulgated at Uhuru Park, marking a historic moment in Kenya's journey towards a brighter future. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 introduced gender-responsive reforms, including decentralization and the not more than two-thirds gender principle to promote inclusive participation in governance. The first elections under the new constitution in 2013 saw a significant rise in women holding positions in both the legislature and executive. Notable among them, Peris Tobiko, who rose to become the first woman elected from the conservative Maasai community on a dual-gender seat. In 2017, the number of women leaders increased. Remarkable was Sophia Abdi Nur, who broke through to become the first female Somali MP from Ijara constituency, a dual-gender seat. 2017 also saw 3 women elected for the first time ever as governors: Joyce Laboso of Bomet, Anne Waiguru of Kirinyaga, and Charity Ngilo of Kitui. In the 2022 election, a surge of women stepped forward to contest elective positions, resulting in a marked increase in those successfully elected on dual-gender seats. 7 women emerged victorious as county governors, marking a historic achievement. They were Anne Waiguru, who recaptured her seat, Gladys Wanga, Fatuma Achani, Cecily Mbarire, Kawera Mwangaza, Wavinya Ndeti, and Susan Kihika. The cabinet included 7 women as cabinet secretaries, with a female secretary to the cabinet, another important step towards gender inclusivity. Yet, despite these significant milestones, women's representation in both the parliament and the executive still falls short of the constitutional requirement of not more than 2/3 gender principle in elective and appointive positions. But the push for gender equality in leadership has remained continuous and sustained. On September 5, 2016, 2 civil society organizations, CRU and CRAWN, filed High Court Petition number 371 of 2016, seeking to declare Parliament's failure to enact legislation for the 2/3 gender principle a violation of the Constitution. On March 29, 2017, the High Court ruled in favor of the petitioners, ordering Parliament to pass the necessary laws within 60 days, failure to which anyone could petition for the dissolution of Parliament. The deadline passed and Parliament recessed without taking action. In September 2020, the then Chief Justice David Maraga was successfully petitioned and he issued a historic advisory to the President, recommending the dissolution of Parliament due to its failure to enact the necessary legislation to implement the two-thirds gender principle. Today's generation of women in Kenya continues the legacy of those who came before them. In 2024, Faith Odhiambo, President of the Law Society of Kenya, was awarded the prestigious ICJ Kenya Jurist of the Year award for her crucial role in defending the rights of protesters during the 2024 anti-finance bill protests, dubbed the Gen Z protests. Among the leading women in the Gen Z protest include Shakira Wafula, Mercy Jebet Tarus, Njoki Njanya, Wanjiru Wanjira, Dr. Stella Wanjiru Bosire, Shiko Kehika, Hope Mwinzi, Njeri Migwi, Beverlyn Kwamboka, Adele Onyango, Nyandi Agashago, and Hanifa Farsafi, among many other young women. This is a continuation of the legacy of strength, a legacy that goes far beyond breaking barriers to ensuring that the doors they open will remain wide open for the future generations of women to come. The stories are continuing to be told. It is through spotlighting and amplifying their voices, challenging the status quo, and fighting for a Kenya where every woman has a seat at the table, a voice in the room, and a hand in shaping the future that will shatter the proverbial glass ceiling.